What if everything you thought you knew about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle was about to be turned upside down? What if the very foundation of the royal family was shaking, and the man who once swore to stand by his wife found himself speechless, unable to comprehend the scope of what was unfolding? Imagine hearing news so shocking, so unprecedented, that it threatens to redefine loyalty, family, and legacy all at once. That's exactly where we are today. King Charles, the monarch who has spent decades balancing duty, diplomacy, and discretion, has made a decision that has stunned the palace, the public, and perhaps most of all, Prince Harry himself. And what's worse, it comes at a time when Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, is allegedly continuing a series of actions that have threatened the royal family's reputation, leaving a trail of media frenzy, confusion, and whispered speculation in her wake. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The timing couldn't be more dramatic. Over the last few months, whispers from insiders have hinted at tension between the royal family and Meghan Markle reaching a breaking point. But insiders never expected that King Charles would act so decisively, in a move that many are calling unprecedented. The decision isn't just about titles or money. It goes far deeper. It questions trust, loyalty, and the very essence of what it means to be part of the British royal family. For Harry, this is no longer a story about personal grievances or media pressure. It's about confronting a truth he may not be ready to face, a truth that could forever alter the course of his life. Now, let's pause for a moment. You might be thinking, surely this is just another media exaggeration, another royal drama blown out of proportion. But here's the thing. Sources close to the palace are claiming that the events unfolding are not only real, but they are severe, calculated, and potentially catastrophic for the Sussexes. Imagine receiving a letter or a call from your father-in-law, the king of one of the most powerful monarchies in the world, telling you that the consequences of your actions have reached a tipping point. How would you react? Panic, disbelief, denial? Or would you attempt to negotiate, to salvage a situation spiraling out of control? Prince Harry, as we will explore in this video, found himself in precisely that situation. So what exactly triggered King Charles's shocking decision? According to multiple palace insiders, Meghan's recent actions have been the tipping point. Allegedly, she has continued to engage in a campaign that some perceive as an attempt to manipulate public perception, distort facts, and undermine the credibility of the royal family. While Meghan and her team have publicly framed their actions as seeking truth and fairness, behind closed doors, royal aides and advisors describe a pattern of behavior that has caused deep concern within Buckingham Palace. The specifics are complex, nuanced, and sometimes contradictory. But that is exactly why this story matters now. At its core, this isn't just a family feud. It's a high-stakes drama that spans media manipulation, legal maneuvering, and emotional warfare. Every move Meghan makes is scrutinized under an unforgiving public eye, while Prince Harry is caught in the middle, torn between loyalty to his wife and duty to his family. Can you imagine being in Harry's shoes? To feel betrayed, to question your marriage, yet also question your own judgment. The stakes are incredibly high because this isn't just about personal pride. It's about history, reputation, and legacy. Here's another layer to consider: the global media. Every tweet, every headline, every leaked document is amplified tenfold in today's digital world. Meghan's every action is dissected, analyzed, and weaponized in a way that past royal controversies could never have imagined. But while the public narrative might paint her as a victim, insiders suggest a far more complex picture, one where actions, intentions, and consequences collide in unpredictable ways. And at the center of this storm is Harry, a man whose every choice now carries both personal and historical weight. Let's talk about Harry's position. He has always been portrayed as a prince torn between two worlds: the duty-bound royal upbringing he was born into, and the desire to forge his own path alongside his wife. His decisions have often sparked debate, sometimes admiration, sometimes criticism. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for the conversation he had with King Charles. It wasn't just a discussion about protocol or titles. It was a reckoning, a moment where the consequences of loyalty, love, and trust collided in a way that left Harry, for the first time in years, truly speechless. And that's what makes this story gripping. We're not talking about casual disagreements or minor misunderstandings. We're talking about a family at the highest level of scrutiny, a family whose every internal conflict is amplified by public interest, and a decision that has far-reaching implications not just for the individuals involved, but for the monarchy itself. Can you picture it? A king, the embodiment of centuries of tradition and authority, delivering a verdict that challenges not only the actions of a family member, but the very narrative that the public has come to believe about the Sussexes. But here's the twist. While the palace braces for the fallout, Meghan Markle allegedly continues to engage in activities that some insiders describe as provocations. Reports suggest that she has not paused in her efforts to shape public perception in ways that could potentially harm the monarchy. And in response, King Charles's decision carries with it consequences that are both severe and explicit: return to the UK and face accountability, or risk escalating the situation beyond repair. For Harry, this is a moment of impossible choices. Do you stand with your spouse unconditionally, or do you acknowledge that some actions have crossed lines that can never be undone? The emotional weight of this scenario cannot be overstated. Imagine the tension in the room as these conversations unfold. The stern, measured authority of King Charles on one side, the disbelief and turmoil of Prince Harry on the other. Every word carries history. Every pause is loaded with unspoken consequences. And the decisions made in these moments will echo far beyond the palace walls. It's a dynamic that combines personal loyalty, public scrutiny, and historical significance all at once. A perfect storm of drama that rivals any headline-grabbing royal scandal of the past century. And yet, there's more to the story. There are whispers of internal palace dynamics that are rarely, if ever, revealed to the public. Advisors with conflicting loyalties, aides caught between discretion and duty, family members whose opinions might tip the balance of the situation. Every detail matters, because in moments like these, a single leak, a single misstep, can alter perception in irreversible ways. Harry, for all his experience navigating media and public attention, suddenly finds himself unprepared for the magnitude of what is happening. A feeling compounded by love, loyalty, and the crushing weight of familial expectation. So, why does this story matter now? Because the consequences extend far beyond the personal. This is about the legacy of the monarchy, the public trust in the institution, and the fragile line between private family matters and public spectacle. Every action taken by Meghan, every response from Harry, every decision by King Charles contributes to a narrative that will be remembered, dissected, and debated for decades. And it is in this tense, high-stakes environment that we find ourselves today, on the brink of revelations that will shock even the most seasoned royal watchers. Now, before we move forward, ask yourself, how do you weigh loyalty against accountability? When does defending someone you love cross the line into complicity? And what happens when history, reputation, and family collide in ways that feel unstoppable? These are the questions Prince Harry is grappling with right now. And the answers, as we will uncover, are neither simple nor expected. And here's the kicker: the story does not unfold quietly. Even as Harry processes the implications of King Charles's decision, Meghan Markle's next moves are already in motion, her strategies seemingly designed to provoke, influence, and maintain control over a narrative that some insiders claim is dangerously skewed. Every phone call, every media appearance, every subtle public statement is under scrutiny. And the tension between the palace and the Sussexes continues to build, creating a powder keg scenario where one wrong step could ignite a crisis of historic proportions. So, what did Prince Harry do next? How did he react to a decision that could redefine not just his life, but his place within the royal family forever? What is Meghan's response to an ultimatum that demands accountability at the very moment when the world is watching more closely than ever? These are the questions we will answer in this video. But first, we need to peel back the layers of this story, exploring the tension, the drama, and the stakes at every level, from intimate family conflicts to public perception and global media scrutiny. What happens when a family, bound by history, tradition, and expectation, begins to fracture from within? Imagine the tension in a room where every word carries decades of unspoken rules, where loyalty is measured not just in actions, but in perception, and where one misstep can reverberate across the globe. This was the scene inside Buckingham Palace in recent months, a private family meeting that insiders describe as explosive, a confrontation that left hearts racing, heads spinning, and a prince at the center completely speechless. The royal family is no stranger to conflict. From public feuds to behind-the-scenes whispers, the monarchy has weathered its fair share of scandals. But nothing in living memory compares to the rift that has been quietly growing between Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the core of the royal establishment. Sources reveal that tensions reached a boiling point after a series of events that, while seemingly small on the surface, compounded into an undeniable pattern. Meghan's alleged media manipulations, her public statements about royal life, and her refusal to follow traditional protocols. Each of these moments may have seemed isolated, but together, they created a storm that demanded a response from the top, the king himself. The rift, insiders say, didn't appear overnight. It began subtly, with quiet dissatisfaction and cautious conversations among advisors. Small incidents, private remarks, and rumored discontent were initially dismissed as typical family disagreements. But those closest to the palace knew better. Every appearance Meghan made, every interview she gave, and every social media post carried the potential to escalate the situation. And Prince Harry, caught between his love for his wife and his loyalty to his family, became the bridge between two worlds, a role that, according to sources, has grown increasingly impossible to maintain. Consider the dynamics at play. On one side, you have the monarchy, an institution built on centuries of tradition, duty, and expectation. Every action is scrutinized, every deviation from protocol noted, every perceived slight analyzed for its historical significance. On the other side is a woman who, by most accounts, operates with an acute awareness of media power and narrative control. Meghan Markle's influence is undeniable. She has the ability to shape public opinion with a single statement. But insiders suggest that her strategy has at times clashed directly with the monarchy's preferred discretion and decorum, creating a tension that is now impossible to ignore. In private, this tension manifested in heated conversations. Advisors describe exchanges where words were sharp, voices raised, and emotions raw. There were moments of disbelief, frustration, and even fear. Fear of public perception, fear of internal betrayal, and fear of long-term consequences. It's not just a clash of personalities, it's a collision of values, priorities, and power structures. And Prince Harry, often the voice of reason in previous conflicts, found himself rendered almost silent, processing the gravity of what was unfolding. One insider recounts a particularly tense meeting where King Charles, typically composed and measured, expressed his dismay in no uncertain terms. The conversation reportedly centered on Meghan's recent media activities, public statements that some in the palace believe were intentionally misleading or provocative. Harry listened, reportedly torn between defending his wife and acknowledging the legitimacy of his father's concerns. The air in the room, according to sources, was thick with unspoken accusations and raw emotion, a mix of loyalty, love, and frustration colliding in a way that few could navigate successfully. But it wasn't only the words exchanged that intensified the rift. The context and history behind them played an equally powerful role. Prince Harry has always been protective of his mother's legacy, sensitive to the public's scrutiny of his family, and deeply aware of the complexities of royal life. Meghan, by contrast, comes from a world outside the palace, where narrative control and media influence are powerful tools in shaping perception. When these two worlds collided, the friction was inevitable. What's fascinating, insiders suggest, is not merely the conflict itself, but how both parties responded, how loyalties were tested, alliances questioned, and family bonds strained to their breaking point. Now, let's step back and consider the public dimension. The monarchy is a global institution subject to intense scrutiny and constant speculation. Every move, every misstep, every word is magnified, dissected, and debated. Meghan's actions, intentional or otherwise, have fueled a media narrative that paints a picture of division, tension, and scandal. Public opinion is polarized, and the palace feels the pressure not just internally, but externally, from tabloids, social media, and international media outlets, all eager to report on any hint of discord. Harry is caught in the middle, balancing the private pain of family conflict with the public weight of expectation, a position few could navigate without emotional fallout. But the rift goes beyond personalities and media perception. There are deeper questions at play: loyalty versus accountability, love versus responsibility, personal ambition versus duty. When a family's private disagreements spill into the public sphere, the consequences are amplified, sometimes catastrophically. Insiders suggest that this rift has now reached a stage where it can no longer be managed quietly. It has demanded a decisive response, a move from the top that will send ripples throughout the palace, the public, and the world. It's important to understand the human element in all this. Prince Harry, despite his royal upbringing, is also a husband, a father, and a man navigating a highly unusual set of pressures. His decisions are informed not only by tradition but by emotion, by loyalty, and by the desire to protect those he loves. Yet, the scale of the current rift leaves him in uncharted territory. How do you reconcile love with responsibility? How do you act when your spouse's choices conflict with the very institution you have sworn to uphold? These are the questions Harry faces, and the answers are far from simple. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle's perspective adds another layer of complexity. Reports suggest she sees her actions as justified, necessary, and even courageous, an effort to speak her truth and maintain control over her own narrative. To her, loyalty to herself and her public image may outweigh traditional considerations of duty or protocol. To the palace, however, her actions are increasingly viewed as destabilizing, provocative, and damaging. The tension between these perspectives has escalated to a point where a dramatic intervention became inevitable. So, what exactly happened during that meeting inside the palace? Sources describe a series of exchanges where frustrations boiled over, where accusations were leveled, and where Harry found himself in a position he had not anticipated, utterly silent, processing not just the words being said, but the implications of what they meant for his marriage, his family, and his future. The rift was no longer a private concern. It had become a moment that demanded clarity, resolution, and, ultimately, a decision that only the king could make. And here lies the critical point. This rift is not merely about disagreement. It's about consequences. The actions taken by Meghan Markle, the reactions of Prince Harry, and the response of King Charles all converge at a single, high-stakes junction. One wrong move, one misinterpreted statement, or one poorly timed action could escalate a private family conflict into a historic public crisis. For Harry, the stakes are personal, emotional, and existential. Every choice he makes now carries the weight of love, loyalty, and legacy. The palace insiders describe a tension that is almost palpable, a silence filled with unspoken accusations, mutual concern, and a dawning awareness of the severity of the situation. Harry, long accustomed to navigating both family and public pressures, is reported to have been caught off guard by the intensity of his father's response. Meghan, confident in her own strategy and narrative, may not have fully anticipated the reach or severity of the consequences her actions could provoke. The collision of these perspectives, insiders say, has created a drama of unprecedented scale within the royal family. And as this rift continues to deepen, the question remains: what will Prince Harry do next? Will he stand firmly by his wife, even in the face of the king's unprecedented decision? Or will he acknowledge that certain lines have been crossed, lines that could irreparably damage both family bonds and public trust? These are the questions that set the stage for the explosive developments to come, the story of which will unfold in the chapters that follow. But just when it seemed the rift had reached its peak, insiders reveal that one final revelation changed everything. A piece of information, a subtle but powerful disclosure, shifted the dynamics in a way no one expected, leaving Prince Harry momentarily speechless and forcing him to confront a reality far more complicated than any of the previous disagreements. What was this revelation? How did it change the course of the rift? And what did it mean for Meghan Markle, the king, and the future of the royal family. These questions will guide us deeper into the heart of the palace drama, revealing secrets, tensions, and choices that will shock even the most seasoned royal observers. The royal rift, far from being a simple disagreement, is a story of love, loyalty, betrayal, and consequences. A story that demands to be explored in full, from the intimate details of family meetings to the public ramifications that ripple across the globe. What if the very woman Prince Harry stood beside, the woman he pledged loyalty to, had been weaving a web of deception that went far beyond what anyone could imagine? What if every public statement, every carefully curated interview, and every strategic media appearance were part of a plan to manipulate perception? Not just for herself, but against the institution Harry was born into? This is exactly what insiders and palace sources are claiming, and it is the heart of the controversy that has left Buckingham Palace in turmoil. The story of Meghan Markle's alleged deception begins not with dramatic headlines, but with a series of seemingly minor inconsistencies, contradictions, and carefully spun narratives. Initially, these actions were dismissed by some as normal media strategy, the kind of careful story management celebrities and public figures often employ. But for those watching from inside the palace, these small actions painted a disturbing picture. Advisors began to notice a pattern. Interviews that shifted blame subtly but unmistakably, statements designed to evoke sympathy while undermining royal tradition, and public appearances that often contradicted private conversations. Take, for example, the interviews that Meghan gave to major media outlets, where she spoke about struggles within the royal family. To the public, these interviews seemed heartfelt and courageous, an attempt to shed light on her experiences. But insiders suggest that behind the scenes, these statements were carefully calculated, sometimes misleading, and occasionally in direct conflict with the accounts of those within the palace. It was a strategy that relied on selective truth, emotional storytelling, and the power of perception. A combination that, according to insiders, has caused deep concern for King Charles and other senior members of the royal family. Even small details matter. Insiders have pointed to discrepancies in timelines, narratives that shifted subtly between interviews, and claims that appeared exaggerated or misrepresented when compared with palace records. To the casual observer, these might seem like trivial matters. But in a world where protocol, history, and image are paramount, even the smallest deviation can carry enormous weight. Every word Meghan spoke was not only interpreted by the public, but also analyzed by advisors, lawyers, and family members. And as the pattern became clearer, it became impossible to ignore the potential consequences. One particularly contentious area, insiders say, revolves around Meghan's alleged attempts to influence media narratives about the royal family. Some reports claim she orchestrated leaks, encouraged selective reporting, and manipulated journalists to create a public perception that served her personal goals. According to these sources, this is not merely about controlling her own image. It's about shaping a story that positions her in opposition to the monarchy, painting the institution as restrictive, unkind, and out of step with modern values. For King Charles, who has spent a lifetime balancing tradition with public expectation, this strategy is deeply troubling. But deception, according to palace insiders, was not confined to public statements. It allegedly extended to private interactions, meetings, and even legal maneuvers. Sources describe instances where agreements were allegedly bypassed, requests ignored, and communications selectively shared, all contributing to a sense that there was a disconnect between public narratives and private realities. In some cases, advisors feared that these actions were not just strategic missteps, but deliberate attempts to mislead, confuse, or destabilize the family. What makes these allegations so explosive is the emotional component. Prince Harry, who has consistently presented himself as a man of loyalty and integrity, now finds himself grappling with the idea that someone he deeply trusts may have misled him. Sources describe Harry's emotional state as a mix of disbelief, hurt, and conflicted loyalty. How do you reconcile love and trust with the possibility of deception? How do you navigate the tension between defending someone you care for and acknowledging that their actions may be harmful? These are questions Harry is facing every day, and the answers are far from simple. Compounding the issue is Meghan's mastery of media influence. Her ability to command attention, shape narratives, and evoke public sympathy is undeniable. But insiders argue that this skill, when combined with alleged selective truth-telling, has created a scenario where perception and reality are at odds. The result? A public narrative that sometimes diverges sharply from palace accounts, leaving the royal family struggling to maintain control over its image, while Harry is caught between the truth he knows and the story the world believes. And then there's the legal dimension. Reports suggest that Meghan's alleged deception isn't just about public perception. It may have implications in formal agreements, financial settlements, and legal negotiations. Every statement, every interview, and every public action could potentially have consequences under the scrutiny of lawyers and the courts. For Harry, this adds another layer of complexity. Not only does he have to navigate his own emotions and family dynamics, but he must also consider the legal ramifications of decisions made under duress or misinformation. One insider recounted a particularly tense episode where a public statement made by Meghan contradicted information Harry had received directly from palace officials. The discrepancy was small but significant, raising questions about intent, honesty, and strategy. For Harry, this moment was eye-opening. It highlighted the challenges of balancing private loyalty with public accountability, and it underscored the difficulties of navigating a partnership where trust and transparency are increasingly in question. It's also important to consider the broader implications of these alleged actions. Every claim, every interview, and every media appearance has the potential to influence public perception not just of Meghan, but of the monarchy itself. The palace operates in a delicate ecosystem where reputation, history, and protocol are intertwined. When misinformation or selective narratives enter that ecosystem, the consequences can ripple far beyond the immediate parties involved. According to insiders, this is precisely what has caused King Charles to intervene, an unprecedented move aimed at restoring control, clarity, and accountability. Yet, Meghan's defenders argue that much of this is a mischaracterization. They claim that she has simply been navigating a complex, often hostile environment, speaking her truth, and advocating for her own agency in a world that historically limits women in power. From this perspective, the allegations of deception are exaggerated, rooted in misunderstanding, and fueled by media bias. This tension between perception and reality, between intention and interpretation, is what makes this story so compelling and so explosive. So how does Prince Harry respond? According to insiders, he is torn. On one hand, he has publicly defended his wife, praised her courage, and celebrated her advocacy. On the other hand, he is confronted with evidence, or at least claims, of selective storytelling, contradictory statements, and potential manipulation. This conflict has created an emotional storm, leaving Harry grappling with questions of loyalty, trust, and responsibility. How do you support someone you love when their actions may have serious consequences for your family, your reputation, and your own legacy? And as the tension escalates, the stakes continue to rise. King Charles's response, the palace's internal dynamics, and Meghan's ongoing actions have created a scenario where every move matters. One misstep, one ill-timed statement, one leak could escalate the conflict to levels that are both public and historic. Harry, according to sources, is acutely aware of this, which adds immense pressure to an already fraught situation. The emotional complexity of the situation cannot be overstated. Prince Harry is navigating the impossible: love versus duty, loyalty versus truth, and family versus public perception. Each decision he faces carries consequences that could reshape his personal life, his relationship with his wife, and his position within the royal family. It's a delicate balance, one where the wrong choice could have irrevocable consequences. And yet, despite the gravity of the situation, Meghan allegedly continues to press forward with her actions. Public appearances, media engagements, and strategic messaging all suggest a woman determined to control her narrative at any cost. Insiders describe this as a calculated approach, one designed to maintain influence, evoke public sympathy, and challenge the authority of the palace. For Harry, this is both emotionally taxing and strategically complex. leaving him in a position few could navigate without risk. So what does this all mean for the royal family? The alleged deception, selective truth-telling, and media strategy have not only strained personal relationships, but have also created a high-stakes battle for public perception. The palace, aware of the potential fallout, has reportedly escalated internal communications, legal assessments, and strategic planning. King Charles's unprecedented decision is a direct response to these developments, a move aimed at restoring order and accountability within the family. And here's the cliffhanger. Just when it seemed the palace had a handle on the situation, a new revelation emerged, one that could completely redefine the narrative, challenge Harry's loyalties, and push the rift to a breaking point. What was this revelation? How would it affect Harry's position, Meghan's strategy, and the royal family as a whole? Imagine being Prince Harry in that moment. The world outside your window buzzing with speculation, the media dissecting every headline, every tweet, every whisper, and inside, the weight of a revelation so staggering it leaves you speechless. That is precisely where Harry found himself, caught between his love for Meghan Markle, his loyalty to his family, and the magnitude of King Charles's shocking decision. It's one thing to read headlines or hear rumors. It's another to face the reality firsthand, in the private chambers of Buckingham Palace, where history, duty, and family collide. Sources close to the palace describe Harry's emotional state as a maelstrom of disbelief, confusion, and fear. In private, he reportedly paced, muttered under his breath, and sought reassurance from advisors. But even their guidance could not fully prepare him for the enormity of the situation. He had faced media storms before, public criticism, and familial pressure, yet nothing compared to the combination of personal, public, and historical weight he was now shouldering. Every decision seemed monumental, every response fraught with potential fallout. What struck Harry most, insiders suggest, was the directness of King Charles's intervention. Unlike past tensions, where concerns might have been expressed subtly or through intermediaries, this confrontation was unambiguous. The king outlined not only the alleged actions of Meghan, but also the consequences if her behavior continued. There was no room for ambiguity, no softening of words, no possibility of deflecting responsibility. For Harry, who had always sought to mediate between his wife and his family, this direct approach was both shocking and deeply unsettling. Harry's confusion was compounded by the dual realities he had to navigate. On one hand, Meghan had presented a narrative to the public in which she was the wronged party, a figure standing up against an archaic and restrictive institution. On the other hand, inside the palace, the evidence, correspondence, and eyewitness accounts painted a different picture, one that suggested intentional deception, manipulation, and actions that could damage not just personal relationships, but the reputation of the monarchy itself. To reconcile these two versions of reality, Harry had to confront uncomfortable questions. Had he been misled? Was he complicit? And how much of the narrative he believed was actually the truth? Friends and advisors describe Harry as initially incredulous. He reportedly asked repeated questions, seeking clarification and evidence, struggling to absorb the information. For someone who has spent his life in the limelight, managing expectations, and balancing personal identity with public duty, the sheer magnitude of what he was learning was paralyzing. It was not just the content of the allegations. It was the implication that the life he had built with Meghan, the choices he had made, and the image he had carefully curated were all now under scrutiny from multiple angles simultaneously. Insiders also note the personal betrayal he felt. Prince Harry is, by nature, protective of those he loves, particularly his wife. To hear allegations that someone he trusted might have been deceptive in a calculated way was emotionally jarring. Reports suggest he struggled with cognitive dissonance, wanting to defend Meghan, yet recognizing that some of the claims made by the palace could be credible. This internal conflict fueled a state of shock and confusion that left him momentarily unable to act decisively. Adding to this emotional chaos were the dynamics of public perception. Harry is acutely aware that the eyes of the world are on him. Every reaction, every public statement, every facial expression can be dissected and interpreted. Insiders indicate that Harry felt a pressure unlike any other in his life, having to maintain composure while grappling with emotional turmoil, all while knowing that the global media would not hesitate to interpret hesitation or doubt as weakness, guilt, or betrayal. The dual pressures of private shock and public scrutiny created a storm that was almost impossible to weather. The timing of King Charles's intervention further amplified the confusion. Sources suggest that the decision came at a moment when Harry had been attempting to mediate, to find common ground, and to protect his marriage. Instead of a negotiation or a dialogue, he was confronted with an ultimatum, a clear delineation of boundaries, and a warning about consequences. It was as if the palace had drawn a line in the sand, forcing Harry to reconcile personal loyalty with institutional authority, a task that insiders describe as emotionally and mentally exhausting. In the midst of this turmoil, Harry reportedly sought counsel from trusted advisors, family friends, and confidants. Yet even these conversations offered limited relief. Advisors could provide guidance, context, and potential strategies, but the emotional reality, his love for Meghan, the shock of the king's decision, and the potential implications for his family, remained overwhelming. Sources describe him as oscillating between disbelief, anger, and sorrow, experiencing moments of almost paralyzing indecision. Adding complexity to the situation is the role of Meghan herself. Insiders suggest that she remained largely composed in the days following the confrontation, projecting confidence and maintaining public appearances. Harry, however, could not reconcile this outward composure with the gravity of the private allegations and the king's warning. He reportedly felt torn between supporting her and acknowledging the seriousness of the situation, a tension that only deepened his emotional confusion. Moreover, Harry's shock was intensified by the cascading nature of the revelations. Each new detail seemed to raise the stakes further. Reports, documents, and insider accounts suggested layers of deception and manipulation that he had not fully grasped initially. The more he learned, the more complex the situation became, leaving him in a state of perpetual uncertainty. What could he trust? Who could he rely on? How would these revelations affect his marriage, his family, and his public image? These questions, according to insiders, consumed his thoughts constantly. This internal struggle was compounded by the ripple effects on those around him. Friends describe him as withdrawn, contemplative, and emotionally raw. He reportedly spent long hours reflecting, trying to piece together the truth from conflicting accounts. Every conversation carried weight, every decision potential consequence. It wasn't simply a matter of personal shock. It was the realization that his entire world, as he had known it, was being rewritten in real time. And yet, amidst the confusion, Harry remained acutely aware of the stakes. He knew that inaction or misjudgment could escalate the situation further, both personally and publicly. Every choice mattered. How he spoke to Meghan, how he interacted with the king, how he navigated the media landscape, all of it could have lasting implications. The burden of these decisions, combined with the emotional shock, created a pressure cooker scenario that insiders describe as unlike anything he had experienced before. The palace sources emphasized that Harry's confusion was not a sign of weakness. It was a human response to unprecedented circumstances. Few people in history have been confronted with a situation where personal loyalty, family dynamics, public scrutiny, and historical consequence intersect in such an intense and immediate way. And as he grappled with these competing pressures, Harry faced a critical realization. He could not ignore the situation, nor could he act impulsively. Every step required careful consideration, emotional resilience, and strategic thinking. As the days unfolded, Harry reportedly began to process the implications more fully. He recognized that his love for Meghan and his commitment to family were now in direct conflict. He also understood that the king's decision was not simply a personal judgment. It was a statement about boundaries, accountability, and the preservation of the monarchy's credibility. The tension between personal loyalty and institutional duty reached a peak, leaving Harry in a state of shock that was as much about principle as it was about emotion. And here's where the cliffhanger deepens. Just when Harry believed he was beginning to understand the scope of the situation, insiders reveal that a new, even more shocking development emerged, one that threatened to upend his assumptions, challenge his loyalties further, and place him at the center of a crisis that no one could have anticipated. What was this revelation? How would it alter Harry's decisions, his marriage, and the trajectory of the royal family? What could possibly compel a king, steeped in centuries of royal tradition, diplomacy, and measured discretion, to take a step so drastic that it leaves his own son speechless? That is the question reverberating through Buckingham Palace, the tabloids, and the minds of royal watchers worldwide. King Charles's decision is being described by insiders as unprecedented, bold, and decisive. A move that not only targets Meghan Markle's alleged actions, but also forces Prince Harry to confront choices he may never have anticipated. The context is crucial. Over months, tension had been simmering. An undercurrent of concern over Meghan's media strategies, public statements, and alleged deception had finally reached a tipping point. Palace advisors had reportedly raised alarms, cautioning that unchecked narratives could erode the monarchy's credibility. But while there were whispers, memos, and quiet discussions, no one expected the king himself to step in with a decision that would shake the family to its core. Sources describe the moment as intense, private, and highly charged. King Charles, traditionally measured and composed, reportedly convened a meeting with Harry that went far beyond casual discussion. According to insiders, the conversation was direct and unequivocal. Meghan's alleged repeated misrepresentations, public statements, and potential attempts to manipulate perception could no longer be tolerated without consequence. This decision reportedly included several critical components. First, a call for accountability. Meghan was expected to address allegations and clarify actions, not merely for public perception, but for the internal integrity of the royal household. Second, a warning of tangible consequences. If she continued to engage in behavior seen as damaging, there would be repercussions affecting her status, public engagements, and potentially her familial ties. Third, a stark ultimatum regarding returning to the UK. Failure to comply would trigger further measures, escalating the situation in a way that insiders describe as historic. Prince Harry, according to sources, was left utterly speechless. The gravity of the king's words, the immediacy of the consequences, and the sheer decisiveness of the action created a scenario he had not prepared for. He had long positioned himself as a mediator, attempting to bridge the gap between Meghan and his family, but now he faced a reality where his own loyalty and judgment were being tested in ways he could not ignore. Insiders reveal that Harry's initial reaction was a mix of disbelief and defensive instinct. He reportedly tried to interject, to explain Meghan's perspective, to contextualize her public statements in terms of media pressure and personal agency. But King Charles was firm, his decision unwavering, and his rationale rooted in both principle and history. This was not a temporary reprimand. It was a formal statement of expectation, a line drawn that would not be easily erased. What made the decision particularly shocking to Harry, and to those observing from the outside, is its unprecedented nature. Royal history is filled with disputes, tensions, and even estrangements. But rarely has a reigning monarch confronted such a situation so directly, especially when it involves his own child's spouse. The combination of personal stakes, institutional authority, and public attention creates a drama that is almost unparalleled in modern royal history. Sources suggest that the king's advisors carefully framed the decision, emphasizing clarity, fairness, and procedural correctness. Every word, every nuance, and every directive was designed to communicate seriousness without unnecessary conflict. Yet, even with this measured approach, the emotional impact on Harry was profound. To hear such unequivocal directives from one's father and sovereign, not as guidance, but as binding expectations, was a moment that left him navigating shock, loyalty, and disbelief simultaneously. The decision also sent ripples beyond the private confines of Buckingham Palace. Insiders note that senior members of the royal family, advisors, and aides were immediately informed of the move. Some expressed relief, believing the action necessary to restore order and preserve institutional integrity. Others were reportedly anxious, concerned about the potential fallout in the media and public perception. Every conversation in the palace following the announcement reflected a heightened tension, a sense that history was being written in real time. Compounding the drama, Meghan's response, though initially calm, was closely monitored. Reports indicate that she maintained a composed public demeanor, continuing appearances, interviews, and strategic messaging. However, palace sources claim that the decision left her in a delicate position: continue actions as before and risk severe consequences, or reassess strategy and comply with expectations to avoid escalation. For Harry, this was yet another source of emotional turmoil. Caught between the woman he loves and the father he respects, each demanding allegiance in different ways. Adding another layer, insiders describe discussions about the long-term implications of King Charles's decision. Beyond immediate consequences, the move signals a precedent for how the monarchy might respond to perceived threats to its reputation in the digital age. In an era of instantaneous media scrutiny, selective narratives, and global visibility, the royal family faces unprecedented challenges. By acting decisively, the king is not just addressing Meghan's alleged actions. He is asserting the authority and boundaries of the institution itself. This decision, insiders suggest, also serves as a warning to others who might consider bypassing protocol or undermining the monarchy through media influence. It communicates that public perception, while powerful, does not override familial and institutional responsibility. For Harry, this underscores the tension between personal loyalty and public duty, forcing him to navigate a reality in which choices have far-reaching consequences beyond personal relationships. Yet, even as the king's decision is presented as measured and principled, the emotional stakes remain staggering. Harry reportedly experienced a period of intense introspection, questioning his decisions, his loyalties, and his future. How could he balance his commitment to Meghan with the expectations imposed by his father? How could he reconcile love and duty, personal belief and public accountability? These questions, sources suggest, dominated his thoughts for weeks following the announcement. Insiders reveal that the conversation also included a private acknowledgement of Harry's position and emotional state. The king reportedly expressed understanding of the pressures Harry faces, but emphasized that understanding did not equate to tolerance of actions deemed harmful. This nuanced approach, blending firmness with empathy, heightened the emotional complexity, leaving Harry grappling not only with external consequences, but with an internal moral and emotional dilemma. And then came the ultimatum, the component that reportedly left Harry reeling. Meghan must return to the UK, address the concerns outlined by the king, and comply with expectations, or face escalating consequences. The explicitness of the directive, combined with its immediacy, created a scenario in which Harry had to make urgent decisions. Every minute that passed carried weight. Every action, or inaction, could alter the trajectory of his family, marriage, and public perception. Palace insiders emphasized that this decision was not impulsive. Extensive deliberation, consultation with advisors, legal assessment, and strategic planning preceded the announcement. It was designed to address the escalating rift, safeguard the monarchy's credibility, and assert boundaries without unnecessary spectacle. Yet despite the careful orchestration, the emotional and personal impact on Harry, and the suspense for the public, cannot be overstated. And here's the cliffhanger. Just when Harry thought he was beginning to comprehend the magnitude of King Charles's decision, he received information suggesting that Meghan might not comply, that her next move could challenge the king's authority, provoke public outrage, and escalate the conflict to unprecedented levels. The stakes, already monumental, had just doubled, leaving Harry in a position of uncertainty, shock, and intense emotional strain. The moment the news of King Charles's decision reached Meghan Markle, insiders describe a complex mix of emotions. Calculated composure layered over what some sources claim was simmering defiance. To the outside world, she maintained her usual poise, confident, media-savvy, and in control. But behind closed doors, the palace reveals a different story. A woman strategizing, weighing options, and preparing her next move in a high-stakes game where every decision could reverberate across continents, impact a marriage, and alter the trajectory of one of the world's most scrutinized families. From the start, Meghan's approach has been meticulous. Her team of advisors and media consultants reportedly convened immediately after the announcement to assess potential responses, analyze public sentiment, and map out contingencies. Sources suggest that the plan was twofold. First, to control the narrative in a way that framed her as the wronged party, standing up against an unfair royal establishment. And second, to test the limits of King Charles's ultimatum, subtly pushing boundaries without overtly defying authority. Every interview, social media post, and public appearance was part of a careful strategy aimed at influencing both public perception and internal palace dynamics. But what makes Meghan's approach particularly controversial, insiders say, is the alleged continuation of behavior that had already provoked concern. Rather than immediately addressing the king's concerns or showing compliance, she reportedly continued selective media engagement, giving interviews that emphasized personal struggles while framing the monarchy as restrictive, judgmental, or even hostile. This tactic, insiders suggest, is deliberate. It seeks to create sympathy for her in the public eye while challenging the authority of the institution that imposed the ultimatum. A particularly telling example, palace sources claim, involves a recent interview where Meghan reportedly highlighted tensions within the royal family, subtly implying that she and Harry were being unfairly targeted. While her words were carefully chosen to avoid outright confrontation, insiders argue that the underlying message was clear. A narrative of victimhood designed to sway public opinion and complicate the palace's position. For Harry, this created a profound internal conflict. He wanted to protect his wife, yet he understood that her actions were intensifying the very situation the king was trying to resolve. The strategy also reportedly included controlled leaks and media nudges designed to test responses. Some sources claim that Meghan's team released information in ways that would generate headlines supportive of her narrative while gauging the palace's reaction. Every article, every tweet, every social media post was analyzed, with the goal of maintaining influence over the story and public perception. To observers inside the palace, these tactics appeared as both sophisticated and provocative. A reminder that Meghan is not only navigating a personal conflict, but engaging in a strategic battle of narratives. Insiders also highlight the emotional element of Meghan's reaction. Beyond calculated strategy, there are claims that she felt cornered, misrepresented, and constrained by royal expectations. Her choices, therefore, may have been informed not only by a desire to control perception, but also by a sense of self-preservation and agency. In her view, compliance with the king's ultimatum could be seen as a loss of control over her own story, a concession she may have been unwilling to make without careful consideration of consequences. However, palace sources stress that the approach carries significant risk. Every act of defiance, every public statement, and every media appearance has the potential to escalate the situation. King Charles's decision was deliberately firm, signaling that continued noncompliance would lead to tangible consequences. From the perspective of the monarchy, Meghan's actions risk not only her relationship with Harry and the royal family, but also public trust in the institution itself. In other words, the stakes are enormous, and every strategic move she makes is under intense scrutiny. It is within this tension that Harry's role becomes even more complicated. Reports suggest he has been caught between loyalty and responsibility, attempting to navigate his wife's strategy while respecting his father's authority. Insiders describe him as increasingly conflicted, wanting to protect Meghan, yet recognizing that her continued defiance could have lasting repercussions for their marriage, the family, and the monarchy. His position, they say, is uniquely precarious, emotionally entangled, publicly visible, and strategically constrained. Sources also indicate that Meghan's reaction involved consultation with legal advisors, who reportedly evaluated the implications of both compliance and defiance. Every option, from public statements to travel plans, was weighed for legal exposure, media impact, and strategic advantage. This level of planning underscores the high-stakes nature of the conflict. It is not simply personal or familial. It is a battle over narrative control, legal boundaries, and public perception on a global scale. The palace reports that there were private moments of confrontation and discussion between Harry and Meghan following the announcement. Harry, grappling with shock and confusion, reportedly urged caution, emphasizing the importance of compliance and the potential fallout of continued noncompliance. Meghan, sources claim, acknowledged these concerns but maintained her own perspective on the situation, highlighting her desire to assert agency, maintain influence, and protect her public image. This dynamic, insiders say, has created a tense but delicate balance within the marriage, one where every word and action carries extraordinary weight. Yet, despite the calculated nature of Meghan's strategy, palace sources emphasize that the king's decision continues to cast a long shadow. Every action she takes is now measured against a backdrop of explicit consequences, creating a scenario where even minor missteps could trigger major escalations. According to insiders, this tension has intensified scrutiny, not only within the royal household, but also among international media outlets, public commentators, and royal watchers worldwide. The emotional stakes are equally high. Insiders describe Meghan as navigating frustration, determination, and defiance, coupled with the underlying pressure of global attention. Her reaction is not simply a calculated strategy. It is a response shaped by personal ambition, public scrutiny, and the reality of being one of the most visible figures in the world. This combination, palace sources say, has created an intricate and volatile situation, where each move has the potential to either escalate or defuse the conflict. As this unfolds, one of the most critical elements is timing. Insiders report that Meghan's team has been carefully assessing the best moments to issue statements, grant interviews, or engage with media platforms, all with the goal of shaping public perception while testing the limits of the king's ultimatum. Every choice is deliberate, and every move carries potential consequences for both her personal standing and the monarchy at large. And here comes the cliffhanger. Palace insiders reveal that Meghan is now allegedly planning a move that could directly challenge King Charles's authority, a calculated, highly public decision that, if executed, could push the royal family into unprecedented crisis. For Prince Harry, this development is both alarming and confounding, leaving him caught between his loyalty to Meghan and his duty to his father and the institution he represents. The word ultimatum carries weight, but rarely has it been delivered in a context so emotionally charged, historically significant, and globally scrutinized. King Charles's decision, already unprecedented, now entered a new phase, clear consequences, explicit demands, and a clock ticking that left no room for ambiguity. For Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the royal family, this was not merely a warning. It was a moment that would shape the next chapter of their lives, their legacies, and the public perception of the monarchy. According to palace insiders, the ultimatum was unequivocal. Meghan had to return to the United Kingdom, address the king's concerns directly, and cease actions that were deemed damaging to the royal family's reputation. Failure to comply, the king's advisors reportedly stressed, would trigger tangible consequences, ranging from withdrawal of privileges to formal distancing from the monarchy. This was not diplomacy or negotiation. This was a line drawn in the sand, clear, deliberate, and legally informed. The immediate fallout was electric. Prince Harry, caught in the middle, reportedly experienced a mix of shock, fear, and conflicting loyalties. Sources describe him as oscillating between defending Meghan's autonomy and acknowledging the gravity of the king's demands. He had spent months attempting to mediate, to smooth tensions, and to protect his marriage. Now, however, he faced a scenario where any decision, or indecision, could trigger public scrutiny, family discord, and global media attention. Meghan's reaction, as previously outlined, was layered and strategic. Insiders say she understood the severity of the ultimatum, but reportedly continued to advance her public narrative, emphasizing personal struggles and framing herself as a target of an outdated, inflexible institution. From a strategic perspective, this was high risk. It positioned her in opposition to the monarchy, intensified media attention, and directly tested the limits of King Charles's authority. Every public appearance, every interview, every statement became a calculated move in what insiders describe as a delicate chess game. The palace reportedly moved swiftly to assess potential outcomes. Advisors, legal experts, and senior family members reviewed contingency plans, considering how to respond if Meghan refused to comply or if the conflict escalated. This included potential adjustments to public schedules, communication strategies, and legal measures. all designed to protect the monarchy while minimizing scandal. Yet, even with these preparations, the situation remained volatile, with uncertainty looming over every step taken by Harry or Meghan. One key aspect of the fallout was the impact on Prince Harry personally. Sources reveal that he experienced intense emotional strain, navigating not only the tension between his wife and father, but also the implications for his own public image. He faced an impossible balancing act. Protect Meghan's interests while demonstrating respect and loyalty to the king, all under the scrutiny of a global audience. This emotional pressure, insiders say, has left him exhausted, conflicted, and increasingly aware that each decision carries consequences far beyond the immediate family. The royal staff reportedly experienced ripple effects as well. Courtiers, advisors, and aides found themselves caught between loyalty to the institution and the demands of an unprecedented situation. According to insiders, the palace hierarchy was restructured temporarily to monitor developments, assess risks, and advise on next steps. Every statement made by staff, every public interaction, and every internal communication became part of a broader effort to stabilize the situation while adhering to the king's directives. Adding to the tension was the media coverage. Global outlets, social media platforms, and commentators dissected the ultimatum, analyzing every word, every nuance, and every implication. Sources claimed that the palace recognized the dual challenge, managed the internal conflict while controlling the narrative externally. Every headline, every report, and every